Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Darren Davidson. I'm the CSU Extension Sustainable Landscape State Specialist, and we're excited to have you here for chaos gardening. Before we get started, we'll point out that CSU is an equal opportunity and access and non-discrimination organization. If you have any questions or you're curious to learn more about that, there's a QR code down in the bottom right of your screen. You can pull out your cell phone, click on that, and learn more. Tonight, we are here to talk about chaos in Colorado. I'm joined by an amazing panel. We have John Mergel, Darren Parmenter, Dr. Whitney Cranshaw, and Heather Hoke. Will be kind of hanging out in the background answering questions. John, Darren, and Whitney are going to be joining me on screen. They'll introduce themselves when they pop on. And then we also have Chris Hilgert answering some questions in the background too. So we're going to have some interactive pieces. We're going to be sort of popcorning around, talking about different parts of chaos gardening. And so let's get started. So if you all go to the chat, type in your answer, but don't hit enter yet. When you hear chaos gardening, what comes to mind? Again, queue up your answer, but don't hit enter until I say chaos, and then we'll get this sort of waterfall effect of answers. Ready, set, chaos. Look at that. Okay, wild, random, my style, lots of color, no rows, disorganization. Somebody says my life. I can relate to that. That's great. Okay. That's excellent. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we are going to get into what we mean by chaos gardening. Um, but first, we're going to look at what this viral trend is. So we are hosting this webinar based on a TikTok trend called chaos gardening that really has gone viral. It caught our attention and we thought, let's look at this and let's see what is so appealing to people. So I'm going to play this video. This is an example of what people out there on social media are doing. So you can see kind of patchy grass. Oh, and then lo and behold, beautiful wildflowers. Okay, so that's what social media is saying. You can just scatter some seeds out, maybe put a little water down, and you'll have this beautiful showing of wildflowers. Tonight, we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, really figure out what it takes to have a successful chaos gardening. And let's start with, why is chaos desirable? What is appealing to people? So I'm going to invite John Mergel to come on and talk about that a little bit.
Thanks, Darren. And hi, everybody. My name's John Mergel. I'm the horticulture specialist in Douglas County for Extension, and I'm coming at this from a perennial plant angle rather than just annuals. And when I first heard about chaos gardening and started seeing about it and looked at it, and I was describing it even to some gardening friends, and they all said, "Well, so it's just gardening." And I said, "Yeah, I guess it really is just gardening in a certain style that many people are already doing." And this name of chaos gardening I find a little bit disconcerting because if you look at what chaos actually is, according to the English dictionary, and I'm a word nerd, so I've pulled up the OED and said, all right, let's see about this chaos gardening. And you notice utter confusion and disorder. Yeah, that's sort of in there. We've got this randomness in the garden design, but my very favorite one is at the bottom there is the forces of evil. And who wouldn't want to unleash that on your landscape? And so I think there are a lot of things that chaos gardening could be, as is often the case in social media trends. And so to really help us focus in on what we're talking about tonight, we're going to go and define, all right, when we're talking about chaos gardening here tonight, this is what we mean.
All right, so what is chaos gardening? As I said, this trend is from social media, but really what we're talking about is intentional unintention. So yes, we're mixing and scattering seeds with minimal planning as to plant position, right? When you scatter seeds, you don't know what's going to come up where. So it's not traditionally structured. It's not a very designed space. and it is not an ecological restoration project. So that kind of thing, you're going to be far more specific and intentional around your species selection, perhaps what the goals of the landscape are. If we're just talking about a backyard garden, you can be a little more loose with it. There's the pantry soup versus a carefully planned four-course meal. This is John's analogy saying, John, why don't you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I think this was actually Katie's analogy
Oh,
because I thought it was yours. And if you thought it was mine, then I don't know who wrote that down.
chaos. It's
The
chaos.
idea here is with a chaos garden, you're throwing seeds into position. And whether you're calling it a chaos garden or just growing a garden by directly sowing seeds in the ground. So that's first thing, a chaos garden is sown directly in place. It is not planted with plants. And you're having no planning as to the position of those plants. You're just letting them grow where they want to grow and where the habitat is suitable for them. But you still have to plan in terms of species selection. So the idea here is we're going to make a pantry soup out of what we have in our pantry, but we're not wearing a blindfold while we're getting things out of the pantry. We're still thoughtfully considering what we have available and then using those to create this garden. And I think really the simplest chaos gardens are just spontaneous vegetation that arises. The problem with those chaos gardens is that they don't always meet our aesthetic expectations. As you see in the photo here, this is a lovely chaos garden. It's got a lot of beautiful plants. They're all flowering, and that's almost all Chenopodium album or common lamb's quarters. And I don't know, I've yet to meet anyone who has said that that is meeting their aesthetic expectations, if that was, say, in front of the house, or that they wouldn't be getting a note from the code department.
Thanks, John. So the appeal, what is the appeal about this? Um, the name is sort of fun, right? It's eye-catching, it's fun, it's kind of rebellious, it's kind of alarming. So I think it hooks people, right? It brings people in. In that first video, you just see it go from like, oh, we just have a bare sort of patch of not so attractive grass, and then boom, we get this riot of color, and it's so fun. Um, so people do seem to be drawn to it and do seem to really love this because who wouldn't want the appearance of effortless natural beauty, right? But it's the appearance of. I've heard some people refer to this as there's the natural makeup look. So it looks like you don't have any makeup on, but in fact you have layered on a lot to get that natural look. So that could be, sports or wardrobe or gardening. It seems effortless, but it actually requires a lot of planning and a lot of skill. So we want to be, we want to have one foot in reality here. So it does have a low initial investment. It seems like it's low stakes, not a lot of stress. It's kind of taking the questions out of it. You get lots of plants. You're just scattering lots of seeds. And so you have lots of opportunities for those plants to succeed. You can see that really beautiful California poppy fields in the background. It seems like poof, they just had a lot of moisture and right time of year, and you get this beautiful landscape. That's a natural setting. We're trying to plan something out to look sort of similar to that, but it actually takes planning. John, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So, chaos gardening is also appealing because it's something that we've been doing for a really long time, and I think that humanity, in some ways, has even a subconscious link with this sort of gardening. Again, chaos gardening, called that, is this new trendy marketing thing, but we've been doing this naturalistic flower thing a while. And so, here's a quote from Gertrude Jekyll, who's a famous horticulturist of the last century. And for whatever being a famous horticulturist gets you, you can see that she is highly in favor of making no parade of conscious effort in the garden. So again, we want the garden to look natural. And in fact, going back way past that, even in medieval England, people were doing basically two things with plants. They were growing plants that they could make vinegar out of, and they were growing plants in what they called flowery meads, where they just wanted a nice place to walk around and hang out in the flowers. And that's a chaos garden, essentially. So this is an old technique, and it's really awesome. And it's great that people are getting excited about it.
So why some people might not be so sure about it, they still have questions. Another quote from Gertrude Jekyll, wild gardening is a delightful and in good hands a most desirable pursuit. but no kind of gardening is so difficult to do well or is so full of pitfalls and paths of peril. So we're going to get into some of that. We're going to figure out where are the tricky parts, and we're going to try to set you up for success if you decide to do this. But we want to make sure that we're moving away from sort of the clickbait, right? So you can see like, oh, it's magic. Lose 90 pounds in a week with this one weird trick. Well, we've been gardening for many thousands of years, and if there was one easy way to garden, we'd all know about it. We'd all be doing it. When in fact, gardening, it's a labor of love. It's a lot of trial and error. What works in one part of the state might not work in the other, or even from one neighbor's yard to another, you might get different results. So we don't want to fall prey to the clickbait sort of easiness of this, but also we don't want it to be intimidating. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm not quite sure where to get started with gardening. Maybe it felt intimidating. Maybe if you call it chaos gardening, it'll kind of change that for you. It'll change that perception. And if that's the case, then that's fantastic because we want more people out there engaging with the natural world and experimenting and having fun in their gardens. So let's look at when chaos gardening works. A successful chaos garden is going to do three things. It's going to support local ecology. People are very keen on supporting pollinators, songbirds. Interest in those two things have grown wildly over the last decade or so. It's going to be low maintenance. No garden is going to be no maintenance, but if you can achieve a low maintenance, beautiful garden, then that's a success. And speaking of beautiful, it's going to be pretty. It's going to have lots of colors. It's going to have lots of flowers. So we're supporting ecology, low maintenance, and it's attractive. You have that curb appeal. So if we look at that ecology piece, I'm going to invite Dr. Cranshaw to talk a bit more about that.
So, my name's Whitney Cranshaw. I am in Fort Collins, where I've been for 45 years, and I worked with entomology with CSU for 37 of those years. And I've retired, and I essentially have been doing chaos gardening in my yard for various reasons. The main thing is I wanted to have a yard that had the maximum number of species of insects I could find. And a friend of mine once suggested we probably could get 900 species in my yard if I grew enough kinds of plants. But there are but there are some very important kinds of things that can happen with a chaos garden because it's got a variety of kinds of plants that mature at different times, provide pollen and nectar, and could maybe be food sources for lots of kinds of insects that live on them. So things like butterflies and moths that sip the nectar from plants, but also the caterpillars that turn into those may be things that could be found developing on some of these plants. Um, of course, bees. We have 946 species of bees in Colorado, and I think any yard could probably get at least 50 if you gardened well and provided enough kind of plants, almost a yard, as long as you provide some habitat. And then other things that a chaos garden can provide is habitat for the kinds of insects that feed on pest insects that give us stability in terms of whether pests go out of control, like lady beetles, but many other things. And these kinds of insects often feed on nectar and pollen in the adult stage, and their young stage feeds on different kinds of insects. And you have a diverse little site. Uh, then this can be an area where these insects can breed and then provide benefit to you in the rest of your yard. Plus birds. Birds come in, they're feeding on some of the insects in these sites, and they're also feeding on the seeds that get produced. Anyway, you can have a little biodiversity spa for lots of kinds of life if you have a good chaos garden.
Great, thank you. So how cool is that, right? We're supporting all of this wildlife. We're creating habitat for all these invertebrates and songbirds through something that potentially is pretty simple for us to do. So the other key point is having a low maintenance garden. So these low maintenance principles for success, we want to take 2 points from the natural world. So the best mulch in the world is plants. What do we mean by that? What we're talking about is having soil coverage. So if we have a good solid density of plants, then we don't actually have to apply mulch because those plants are sort of filling in all of those gaps. They're cooling the soil, they're suppressing weeds, they're doing what would naturally be happening without somebody coming in and actually adding mulch. And then secondly, you're matching your plant's life strategy to your site conditions. So a lot of people are familiar with the phrase right plant, right place. And that can be sort of misinterpreted. A lot of people think I need to amend my soil heavily so that I can grow this certain plant palette. When in reality, you're going to be much more successful, and it's going to be a lot easier if you get a soil test done, learn what kind of soil you have, and then match your plant palette to your existing site conditions. So you want to make sure that you have that understanding. That's one of the first places you're going to start with, really understanding your site. And I do want to point out the comment about the best mulch in the world is plants. There's a European horticulturist who designed the London Olympic Park plantings, came to Denver and remarked, "You Americans are very proud of your mulch." Meaning, we have so often our landscapes, especially in Colorado, certainly on the Front Range of Colorado, we have our plants spaced really far apart. And so we'll have these huge expanses where we put mulch down. That's not what chaos gardening is. That's not necessarily even what you want to be doing in a more designed, planned out garden. You want to have a good, solid density of planting. You don't want things to be so close that it causes issues where they grow into each other or you don't have good air circulation. But certainly when you're talking about chaos gardening, you want to have a nice full patch of plants. And now we're going to invite Darren Parmenter in, and he's going to talk about his site where he unknowingly slid into chaos gardening.
Hey everyone, my name is Darren Parmenter. I'm a Western Region Director for CSU Extension, so I oversee the western side of the state. Prior to that, I was the horticulturist down here in La Plata County for 17 years. I'm based in Durango, so maybe different. I'm curious where everybody on this webinar is located at. My best guess is probably more Front Range folks and not as many down here in the southwest corner, but it's a different environment for sure. We are kind of a high alpine desert, very little precipitation, especially in the form of rain. This was a rough summer, just to give it perspective. I think I received some rain on June 4th and then didn't receive much in the way of rain until early September. And then now in September, we've had this amazing monsoon season and it's been fantastic. So you just never really know what you get. Yeah, I guess I'm a case study into the world of chaos. I am not a chaotic gardener by any means. That is not where I feel comfortable. It's probably where my wife feels more comfortable in the wildflowers than I do. I grow a lot of veggies, and my veggie garden is definitely not chaotic. It is very well planned out. I mentioned in our earlier presentation today that my number one tool in the vegetable garden is a dibble board, which is 32 or 24 equally spaced pegs to give me a very well-defined vegetable bed. That brings me joy. That gives me kind of takes my anxiety down. And I've definitely seen some really successful chaotic vegetable gardens, but they give me a tremendous amount of anxiety. So even just dealing with this, I had, it's been years in the making of why I'm taking certain things out to put other plants in. And I kind of like it boils down to two reasons. One is we have a very large lot at our house, and it's about 8,000. We moved in 2018 to about 8,000 square feet of lawn. And that was a really high water bill. So I was challenged financially, challenged environmentally, in terms of having that much turf. For what reason? But taking it out is also incredibly expensive, and then replacing that with plants and above mentioned, before I mentioned mulch, it got really pricey. So I kind of thought that maybe in a different space, as I continued to take out lawn, to remove the planned landscape in terms of containerized plants and trees and move into more of the wild seeding. And It's worked. I mean, for every success, there's been one mistake and there's been one drawback, and I still have those, and that's okay. I guess that lends itself into the chaos. But yeah, we've probably taken out, I'd say maybe 2,000 square feet of weaker turf. So again, taking out some turf that was not, that I always struggled with. I struggled getting irrigation too. I struggled getting it to get germination, good coverage, which then meant a ton of weeds. And then also just kind of what Dr. Cranshaw had mentioned was to increase insect diversity. We are really definitely going for more pollinators on my property. So that's one of our big goals. So if we can increase the amount of plant species to attract and keep those pollinators on our property, then we're going to be successful. Again, so, and we kind of they're gonna Darren and John will cover a lot of these steps and what we did. It was a fair amount of work to get rid of turf and just cutting off irrigation and then tilling it. I'm not a big fan of the tiller, but this was one case that I felt like it was probably a good idea to use. I did add a little bit of my own homemade compost into this, and then I'll go through and I'll seed. And so everything is collected into one container, and I just disperse it by hand. It's nothing overly technical. And then I can share. I think I may try to put all the seeds that I've thrown in the space in the chat at some point, and it'll just be a long list of different species, and then you guys can copy and paste it if you need to. And then again, throw seed out. I came back through with just like what we call soil pep is just it's a bag material and you can also get it bulk. I like it because it's pretty fine in terms of what we call a mulch. And then it just breaks down into organic matter within one season. You can't discern any of the small wood chips or wood pieces in that within, 6, 7 months. And then I irrigate. I think Darren had kind of mentioned this, like irrigation is part of this. You just can't throw seeds out and expect them to germinate without some sort of either irrigation or precipitation. Again, we see all these chaotic gardens on social media, and it's not a surprise if they're not located in the arid southwest of Colorado. I've done this before. I just throw seeds out, and you just kind of, you do your dance and your prayer, and you hope they germinate, and usually you are greatly disappointed. So again, I've gone through, I'll irrigate, and then as the seeds start to germinate and get to that second, third leaf stage, I'll cut back the irrigation a little bit, but I will keep it as long as it's not raining. I do keep irrigation on our plants. Um, Kind of the definitely the challenge is weeds. Weeds moved into disturbed spaces. So some of the weeds are no joke, like mallow, bindweed, lamb's quarters, pigweed, yeah, pigweed, purslane. Some of them are kind of brutal in the garden space, and they take over for sure. Other ones, and you can see in one of these pictures, is I did introduce sunflowers into our mix, and that's kind of a love-hate for me. I do love them because of the pollinator effect. Um, the hate part is that they can be pretty aggressive. They rapidly reseed and they can take over this space. So I would say this year I pulled out about 400 and probably left 400. So we still have a lot of sunflowers on our space and probably too many just because of the reseeding aspect. But we definitely still love hate. And then I also added native grasses into this mix. So to increase diversity, increase rooting depths, all those things I think were probably beneficial to our space, and we're going to continue it. First years on both cases have been super successful. Second years in different locations have not been as successful. So I'm going to continue trying to continue to diversify that mix and again do the same dance and the same prayer that we make every year and hope things germinate. And it rains and snows.
Great. Thank you, Darren. So you can see that's a real life Colorado example. He had some goals for his landscape. He chose his seed mix and got to work. So he kind of talked through some of this, but a successful chaos garden. What are we going to see in a successful chaos garden? We're going to have a lot of different species. We're going to have a lot of different plants. You can certainly do a seed mix with just 3, 5, 6, something like that, different species, but it's not going to be as interesting. It's not going to be as robust. And it's not going to sort of exist over a longer period of time. So a lot of, again, the social media trend is showing people just planting annuals. And so those plants are going to germinate quickly. They're going to flower the first year. You're going to get nice color. And then they will reseed, but you don't really have any guarantee that they're going to be coming back year after year. And if you want that, a little more stability, then you're going to want to add in perennials. So John mentioned that he comes at this from more of a perennial side than an annual side. So thinking about your species selection is important. Watering, Darren talked about irrigation, at least during germination. Um, you know, Here I'm on the Front Range, just outside of Longmont. We've had this lovely, cool, drizzly day all day today. Great time to sow seeds in the fall, especially if you're planting species that need cold stratification. They need a period of cold to break that germination. So I think John's going to go into a little bit more about that. But so there are these things that you need to think about. Yes, you can scatter seeds with no irrigation and hope for rain and good snow. But if you want to, again, have a successful garden, you're going to want to be able to have irrigation. And then a long bloom season. So that's going to be curb appeal. It's going to be more attractive to you and your neighbors. But also, again, if you're supporting pollinators, you want to have things that bloom early in the season. When those are done, you have something else that comes in its place mid-season and then as late in the season as possible so that you're providing those floral resources throughout the whole growing season. And then the larger the space, the better, not only for pollinators, but also for the garden. If you have more space, that chaos is going to be more legible. You're going to be able to see more variety, and the aesthetic expectation is going to be more realized than if you have a small plot. That doesn't mean if you just have a small corner of your yard that you want to give this a try, that you shouldn't. You absolutely should. But more space, more flowers, more color, more variety. And then these species are going to be mowable. What do we mean by mowable? At some point, you're going to need to reduce and cut back some of these plants. Again, John is going to go into a bit more detail on that when we talk about maintenance. So don't get caught up on mowable. You don't necessarily have to take a lawnmower and mow them, but you are going to want to, at some point, reduce some of the material that's in the garden. So these are just some things you want to think about. I do want to bring everybody's attention to the Q&A box. If you have any questions, we've disabled the chat, but there's at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A, and if you have questions, feel free to type those in there. Okay, so 7 easy steps to complete chaos. So what are the steps? Again, we're talking social media trends. We're talking a little bit of clickbait. We always want to have those easy steps to success. So first, we want to evaluate our site. Darren talked about his site and what was needed, what he had existing, what he had envisioned. You've got to pay attention to that. You're going to want to choose your plants carefully. You want to know what they're supposed to look like, at least what that anticipated performance is. You don't necessarily want to use what's cheap, although a lot of people start these things from a seed packet that they got at a farmer's market or a community event. People like to hand out seed packets, which is fun. But you do want to kind of review or take a look at the actual species in there. Sometimes there are species that are not necessarily the best choice for your area. So if you have questions about that, you can always contact your local extension office and run it by them. And then availability, of course. You're going to want to suppress the weed seed bank. So there are different options. Again, John will get into a little bit more detail on this. But when you have bare soil, there's likely a lot of weeds in there. And so those weeds are also going to germinate as you're as you're irrigating more, getting the soil more moist. So you're going to want to you should at least know that you're going to have to deal with the weed seeds. You're going to sow your seeds. You want to get good seed to soil contact. So I think Darren mentioned he kind of raked things in. Some people will kind of gently walk on their site, depending on how big the space is, to tamp things down a little bit. You're going to water. Again, you've got to get that water down for germination. You're going to want to weed. So being able to identify the difference between your seedlings and weed seedlings is important. And then at some point, you're likely going to mow, cut down, shorten in some way that biomass in those plants. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail on all of these. But John, I'd like to invite you to talk about a little bit more about evaluating the site.
Sure. So when it is time to install your Chaos Garden, if you want to go to the next slide, Darren, um, when it's time to install your Chaos Garden, you do want to really look at what the site is like, and you want to have some goals for your plants. So you're not just saying, I'm going to have a Chaos Garden. That's not really a landscape level goal. You want to know, I want lots of color. It's going to be in this area. It's going to flower from this time to this time. It needs to be this tall or no taller than this. And then you want the plants to be able to grow there. And that's really, it's not about, I live in Colorado, so it should be a Colorado native plant, or it should be generally for a dry place because it's dry here. You really want to look at the site that is in your location rather than trying to rely on, again, assumptions. So if you go to the next slide again, Darren, please. Um, so you'll see, for example, in the picture that is about to appear, there it is. This is in Denver. It's the SU Spur campus, and we're going to install a Chaos Garden here. In fact, there's a Chaos Garden there already in the form of some spontaneous vegetation. And this is not a site for xeriscape plants. How do I know that? Because you can see that there's standing water in this site. And so it's really not about being in, all right, well, I'm on the Front Range. It's dry here. You know, we get 14 inches of rain a year. But this is not a dry site. So this is not the place where I want to put those really drought adapted plants. I want to pick plants that can tolerate standing water in order to be successful with a Chaos Garden here.
Want to keep going?
Sure. So, the things that you should consider when you're choosing your chaos packet, which oftentimes for easy beginning, if you just want to use annuals, you can buy a pre-mixed packet. If you want to do this with perennials or longer flowering things, then you want probably to buy individual species and make your own packet. But you want to know something about the productivity of your site. So how much organic matter is in the soil, because that's going to tell you about nutrients that are available. And that goes hand in hand with water, because even a nutrient-rich soil that's super dry isn't all that productive. You do want to also evaluate when you're picking your plants and your size of the garden, what scale, how much time do you have for this? I am much less wise than Darren. I've had some spectacular gardens where I tried to do like 19,000 square feet at a time. That was a bad idea. So starting with a smaller area and expanding, way better than going all at once if you don't have time. And then, of course, considering your budget, as Darren mentioned as well, when you're choosing those seeds. Seeds are generally cheaper than plants, but not all seeds are cheap. So do some investigation about availability and price before you set your heart on a particular species.
Okay, and so we've mentioned irrigation and water a couple times. So Dr. Cranshaw, if you want to talk about natural moisture events.
A couple of comments. I have found very good success with getting improved seed germination when I take advantage of natural moisture events that do come through. So today, as Darren already mentioned, she lives down in Longmont, but I'm in Fort Collins. We've had drizzle for 2 days. This is perfect for a period when I want to cast seeds out and get them to germinate. So I look forward to those. And in the wintertime, I'll if there's some kind of winter event coming through in January, February, or maybe a little bit later, but a really nice wet snow, I'm out there spreading seeds then. I think a lot of the seeds need some sort of stratification and period of cold to do it. But anyway, take advantage of moisture when you get it. I mean, that's when you should be out there. And today, that's what I was doing.
Right.
Next slide.
Thank you. Yeah. So the next slide, John is going to tell us about this garden. This is one of his chaos gardens.
Thanks, Darren. So this is a planting that is in the city of Englewood. And again, as I mentioned, I'm really interested in chaos gardens that are using a lot of perennial plants rather than just annuals, because the low maintenance aspect is really important for public places like this park, where we don't want to have to be re-preparing soil for annuals each year or re-sowing seeds. We want to get this thing established and then have those plants grow. This is the first year of that garden, which is several years ago now, and you can see that there are some annuals out there. In fact, this yellow plant is a yellow bee plant, and it is an annual, and it was there intentionally to cover ground quickly. Again, that plants as mulch concept, and then just to create flowers in the first year, so it looks like something is going on. Because perennial plants, oftentimes from seed, take 2 or 3 years before they reach flowering size. There are a few exceptions to that. So keeping a mix of some annuals in with your perennials is a good idea if you need that early impact. We prepared this site by first killing the poor quality lawn that was there. And then we did suppress the weed seed bank. And the strategy that we used here was actually to use what I will call a sowing mulch. And that's different from a wood chip mulch or something like that. It is just a weed seed free growing medium that can support seed germination. So for us, we use decomposed granite or crusher fines, also known as breeze, depending on what part of the state you're in. And we put that down 4 inches deep, and that just buried all of the weed seeds deep enough that they couldn't germinate. Another thing you could do is to water this before you put your desired seeds down and then spray the weed seeds as they germinate and come up and kill them and then put your desirable seeds down. The only things that are off the table, you could solarize. There are lots of things you could do to kill those weed seeds or suppress the seed bank. The only thing you can't do is sprout all the weed seeds and then go pull them by hand or rototill them or hoe them, because then you've created another soil disturbance and you've just brought up more seeds. So whatever method you choose for suppressing the seed bank, you want to make sure it minimizes soil disturbance. And then we planted our plants. We did water with an irrigation system. We planted in the fall because, as Dr. Crenshaw mentioned, many perennials and most of our natives that are here in the temperate part of the world do need a cold, moist stratification in order to germinate well. So we planted this garden in late October. We had a site in Castle Rock that we planted in the week of Thanksgiving. And when we have had to plant these in the springtime, it's possible, but we did have to go through the extra effort of stratifying those seeds in the refrigerator before we could use them. And that is not without peril either. Darren might remember that we had a few bags of alfalfa sprouts that decided to go for it in the fridge before we actually got them into the ground. So there's a risk without just using the natural cold cycle, which is also just a lot easier and more fun.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Okay, so maintaining your success. So let's say, you do everything just right, you get this wonderful chaos garden. Now what? So we talked a little bit about plant ID. It's very helpful to understand or to know and be able to differentiate your plants. We're going to talk a bit about cutting back, fall cutting back, or deadheading. And then also Dr. Cranshaw is going to talk a little bit about leave the leaves. If you've heard that, it's kind of catchy. And so he's going to go into a little bit of detail about what we mean by that. So John, if you'll tell us about these gardens or this garden.
Sure, yeah, it is both this and these. So this is our Castle Rock, right at the Castle Rock Extension office, and this is our Chaos Garden, our sown flowering meadow garden, all planted from seed. This is the same garden at the same time of year in 3 successive years. And this is getting again towards the idea if you're using perennials, these gardens are going to change, and plant ID is important because if I asked, if I suggest, oh, you should go pull weeds in the garden on the left. If you didn't know what baby evening primrose and baby oregano looked like, then you might accidentally eliminate the garden that is in the right-hand picture. And you can see that that garden in the middle has different plants that are flowering and prominent yet again, all at the same time of year, just in different years. So remember that you need to be able to recognize those plant taxa when they're not just flowering in order to successfully eliminate any weeds that might blow in. and do any sort of management that you might on your desirable plants. So having some plant ID skills is something that, number one, chaos gardening will help you develop in a hurry. But it's great if you have at the outset, at least you're ready and know that you're going to have to identify some plants without flowers on them.
Okay, and Dr. Cranshaw, if you'll tell us about deadheading.
So just seeing that last slide, I want to also make a point on plant ID. I think the when I first moved in Fort Collins, I was getting rid of all of these plants that I thought were Canada thistle, and they were poppies, perennial poppies. So I learned my lesson. Anyway, so you do have to learn your plants. Anyway, deadheading is just an aspect I think that will help you keep the garden going, particularly for two reasons. One, deadheading means cutting the flower heads after they've finished blooming and before they've dropped the seed. And this has a general benefit in that it will cause many plants to continue to flower over a longer period of time, and that's something we want. But some kinds of plants can become invasive that you have. I mean, in my yard, I've got some plants that reseed really heavily and establish the next year, and they're difficult to get rid of. So, like on the left, there's an example of one. It's a globe thistle, beautiful plant, big blue flowers, tons of bees on it for about 3 weeks, but it reseeds everywhere. It's real tough to get rid of. So I aggressively would go after those and deadhead those and get so they don't drop too much seed in my garden. In the middle example in this slide is larkspur, which is something that kind of just showed up when I first moved here and is probably one of my favorite plants that I have every year. It is just super for butterflies, and it does readily reseed, but it's a pretty easy one for me to just kind of pick the plants that I don't want to grow with a hoe or hand pick them. And then anyway, so summer, I don't aggressively reduce the seed for something like that. And then some just seem to produce enough seeds so they're always there without me doing anything. Like on the right is one of my favorite native plants that I have in my yard called variegated spurge, a really common plant down in the southern part of the state that is just a magnet for butterflies and various kinds of bees and beneficial wasps and makes a great cut flower. But I don't do anything with that. I just let it go and see what happens and see where it shows up the next year. Kind of walks around the yard. Anyway, so
Great.
deadheading can be useful.
Thanks.
Next slide.
And now, yeah, tell us about leave the leaves.
The leaves thing is another kind of buzzword kind of concept that's been around for a while. And it essentially means leave a lot of the plant debris at the site. And there's lots of benefits for it. And many of them are horticultural in that they kind of provide a little mulch on the ground that improves soil moisture and kind of insulates. But when people talk about this, I find a lot of people, when they hear about leave the leaves and it's going to benefit insects, they get really wound up and say, "Oh God, no, I'm going to leave. If I rake my leaves, when can I don't want to kill any bugs, any beneficial insects. When can I rake the leaves?" I think in terms of insect life, there's going to be benefited by leaving the leaves around. What you want is to have leaves, particularly around places that there's going to be lots of insulation, where insects that do go through the winter, like lady beetles or the pupae of butterflies I've got a picture there. That's going to be in little clumpy areas, usually where the leaves gather around the base of some kind of plant that you've pruned, perhaps, or maybe not. In the fall, pruned back and left a few inches of the stubble. So it's definitely useful to have some. You don't need to go overboard with it. There's not a lot of leaves you see out in the native prairie areas, and this also gets into the mulch thing. One other thing, this is kind of a mulching effect to have leaves on the surface, but um, one of the things that I'd like to stress about mulch is that in terms of insects, that many of the most important native pollinators we have nest in the soil, and they like to have bare soil. You want to have areas of bare soil, so you don't want to have continuous coverage of thick mulch in any of these gardens. So, but little pockets that are free of the leaves will maybe provide what you need. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. So when chaos gardening doesn't work, let's talk about that. Um, Here's another video. We can see they're doing the right stuff. This is what they expect. So again, that's one of those social media things where they're showing the chaos garden fail. So it looked like she was doing it all right, but she didn't end up with the right thing. So John's going to talk to us a little bit about why a chaos gardening might fail.
Sure. And so remember when we talked about a successful chaos garden, we mentioned that it was going to be supportive of ecology, it was going to be low maintenance, and it was going to be pretty. And so a failed chaos garden, it's going to be short on flowers, it's going to be a lot of work, and you're going to get noticed in all the wrong ways out there in your garden. Like you can see here, this other chaos garden is not really working. Here is this my most prominent professional failure is pictured here. This is that 19,000 square foot sown garden. And I had a few of these how to ensure failure situations going on. I think I picked the correct plants, but I had poor seed to soil contact. It was dry and windy. I couldn't water it. There was just no source. I was relying on natural precipitation. It was a dry spring. So you can see the kochia did just fine, but my desired plants did not do well at all. And so I had a really prominent failure of a chaos garden because I just didn't get lucky with the weather conditions, and I had a lot of weed pressure, and it was way too big for me to go out and try to manage that kochia.
Manage the kochia. Okay, so let's get into some of the maintenance realities.
Right. So talking about maintenance, we say, well, this thing's going to be low maintenance. I threw the seeds and then I have this beautiful patch of flowers. And that's true, but it does depend on your perspective and skill. Because as we've described, you're going to need to know some plant ID. You're going to be hand weeding. You can't use a selective herbicide in a chaos garden because all of the plants will be selected. So it does just change your maintenance. Low maintenance is not no maintenance. And then remember that a lot of these clickbait type social media Shazam videos that you're seeing are from wetter places in general. And we have some really specific environmental challenges in Colorado that we have to work a bit harder to overcome. Drought, I would say, is the primary one of those. And I'm not just talking about extreme, oh gosh, we're in a climatic drought. It's just dry here generally. The precipitation patterns leave long stretches where you don't get any moisture. So that can be really rough on gardens that you are trying to grow from seed. Intense sun, wind, seasons, and then again that weed pressure are all realities that you're going to have to face one way or another. And so when this maintenance stacks up, it could start to seem like, just pulling the lawnmower out of the shed and pushing it around the grass once a week was not so bad after all.
Okay, thanks. So, all right. So moving beyond the hashtag, again, I keep mentioning social media because that's where this trend is really happening. But like John said, chaos gardening, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that your garden is going to be beautiful, that it's going to support butterflies or pollinators, and the various ecological aspects of the space. But if we plant densely with a diverse mix of seeds and species, then, we're probably going to suppress weeds and we're going to have a pretty high likelihood of garden success. Again, following those few steps that we outlined. And then in terms of supporting those pollinators, if we really pay attention to having that structural diversity, that diverse habitat, where we have short plants, tall plants, large flowers, small flowers, lots of different plant forms with that long flowering season, we're going to be able to better support wildlife um, with that plant palette. So definitely worth trying, definitely worth going for it, even if it is, gardening is so much trial and error, right? It's experimentation. It should be fun. You might have a big, huge failure, like John was brave enough to showcase for us. But you might really have a success, and so it's worth trying. We want to be inspired and engaged with plants, and getting out there in the natural world is awesome. So if chaos gardening gets you out there, that's fantastic. If you, like Darren, John, and Whitney, have all been chaos gardening for years, keep at it. Hopefully, you're having a lot of fun with it. We want to grow, we want to have plants that are alive and do well. The habitat will inform what plants do well. Our chaos gardens won't all be the same. You can see this in the background picture there. It's kind of a dry, rocky area. It's not, the tall, lush sort of wildflowers. So chaos gardens can look different. But the key is that we have plants, they're living, they're thriving, they're supporting pollinators, they're providing that curb appeal. And if chaos gardening is a stepping stone to other types of gardening, like again, pollinator gardens, maybe you're getting interested in native plants, native landscapes, which a lot of people are. That's great. This can be a step in that direction. And then, of course, if you're employing sustainable practices, paying attention to water conservation, what kind of materials you're using in your garden, then all of that is a win. All of that is a success. So, is chaos gardening right for you? On one hand, it's playful, it's fun, it's accessible, right? It's taking a lot of the guesswork out of gardening, and it can have that great ecological value. On the other hand, it's not maintenance free. As John was saying, there's always going to be some level of maintenance. Planned chaos can be a little bit tricky. It's not that Shazam garden where you just sprinkle some seeds and walk away. So you have to go into it knowing that. But again, you've got that ecological value. So maybe, hopefully, chaos gardening is for you. And so if we can open up the chat again, we want to do the waterfall effect and ask one more time. Now, when you hear chaos gardening, what comes to mind? And don't hit enter yet. Just get your chat or your word queued up. I'm going to give a couple seconds for that. And now, chaos. Go ahead and hit enter. Let's see what it means. Natural selection, variety or beauty. Fun, fun and worth it. I like that. Variety and full, pollinators, harder than I expected. Right. That's great. It's good. It's good to, see that it's not necessarily all easy peasy. Something new, good variety. Okay, fantastic. That brings us pretty much to the end of the webinar. We've got some resources for you. We're going to put these in the chat, so don't feel like you have to copy it all down. John, do you want to just briefly mention the 3 books that we have listed there?
Sure, yeah. So I like the tactile nature of print books. There's lots of great information on the web, but as a borderline Luddite, I like TikTok. What is this? There are 3 really great books that, if you're not sure about this or you really want to do a deep dive into growing gardens from seeds, that I highly recommend. First one is called Sowing Beauty. This book is about essentially chaos gardens that are perennial, by James Hitchmore, a professor emeritus at the University of Sheffield. This is the guy that was behind the London Olympic Parks, and these gardens are amazing. So that book is fantastic and gives you step-by-step instructions about how to pull this off, how to plant it, how to pick species. So if you really want to get down and dirty, that book is number 1. The second book, Planting a New Perspective, it's not necessarily about growing from seeds, but does really talk about the importance of plant density and using plants as your mulch. And then third, that's an unabridged dictionary-sized tome that is filled with short descriptions of plants. And so if you would like to know what sorts of plants might do well in your habitat, and you want a complete list, I recommend finding a copy of that book to peruse to look at the types of plants that you could try. And then, of
Excellent.
course, web resources like Plant Talk and Fact Sheets.
Great. Thank you. And I can't see the chat right now, but I think we're putting those resources in the chat. And then for our webinar audience, we want to let you all know about three different offerings that we have. And we have reduced rates for you tonight only. No, it'll work beyond tonight, but be sure to get the link right now. We'll also follow up with an email with these resources and links to these classes. This is a new offering, native plants and landscape settings. It's going to help you transform your garden with native plants. And you'll learn fundamental design strategies and discover why native plants are valuable for gardens and ecosystems. So you can see if you either scan that QR code or click the link when it's in the chat or in the follow-up email, you can get this reduced rate. The class is normally $69, and this offering is down to $50. We have another offering called Landscape for Life. It's a whole program. It was developed by the United States Botanic Garden and the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and it is now run by CSU Extension. So this is a whole bundle of classes. It has 6 courses, talks about soils, water, plants, design material, and you can see the list there, all with that sustainability lens. So really helping you understand how to do sustainable landscape practices in your garden. Again, we're offering this reduced rate. The normal bundle price for all 6 courses is $399. If you use this code that we're offering, it is available for $299. And all of these online classes, the material is available for a year, so you have some time to use it. And then finally, CSU Green School. So if you haven't heard of this, this is what master gardeners go through to train. It's a very robust 16 classes. If you've done Green School, feel free to go to the chat and just sort of mention how it was for you and what you thought of it. But you can learn all winter long. It's going to be starting up soon, and it goes into great depth for overcoming Colorado's unique challenges. And again, this is that same curriculum that Master Gardeners go through, but this is open to the public. And it does fill every year, so make sure you register early. So with that, we have, it's almost 8 o'clock, but we can stay on for a few extra minutes to see if there are any questions that we want to answer. And of course, all good extension specialists answer with, it depends. So let's go ahead and see what we have. Anything in the chat or the Q&A boxes that we want to do live?
Yeah, Darren, Stephanie asked a specific question about how many hours of instruction is the short course on natives in landscapes? And I thought you might know that better than I do.
Oh, I should know that. And I don't know off the top of my head, but if you click on the link, it will give you the description. And I believe it gives you the number of learning hours. Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. Any other questions? Or any final comments from our panelists?
No, my recommendation is always, again, someone who's gone through this and seen a lot of failures is I look Colorado first. I think with either seed choices or seed companies. I think that's probably where you're going to get the best success is Colorado or western part of the U.S. I just like the seed that you get is of higher quality and is adaptable to our area. So that's kind of like what I would always recommend if you can find them. And they keep wanting us to get the plant list so you can copy it.
So Darren shared a plant list. You can go back in the chat, and if you click on it and highlight all of the words and use your keyboard shortcuts, Control C for copy and then Control paste, or there are a lot of seed lists or plant lists and seed mixes available. His was beautiful. It worked well in his yard in Durango, but it's not the only one that's going to work. So we invite you to kind of explore, do your own research. If you go to the seed companies that are around Colorado, they have a lot of already pre-mixed seed mixes. So if you just kind of do a little bit of digging around, you should be able to find something good for your site. And one of the links that we shared is a fact sheet on wildflowers of Colorado. And that has a great plant list with both perennials and annuals, I believe.
And for those who are asking to enable the chat is enabled, and I pasted that plant list just a second ago, so it should be right there at the bottom of that chat list. Easy to find for you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chris.
Chris.
As a reminder, like those don't all work. Like I can tell you a lot of those I have not yet seen, and maybe similar to John's situation, they may come up in 2 or 3 years. But I can tell you, as of right now, I haven't seen neither the Rocky Mountain nor the or the Palmer penstemon come up in my mix in my spaces. So while I'm just saying that's what I planted, I am by no means saying those are all going to give you the most amazing chaos garden that you'll ever see, because everything's going to germinate and flower in year one. It just didn't happen for me.
Okay. And so we'll be sending out a follow-up email with all the links and the resources. We're also recording. So the recording will be available soon on one of the CSU Extension channels. And so I would just like to say thank you to all of our panelists, and to Heather Hauk, who was busily answering questions in the background, and to Chris, who was managing the chat. Thank you all so much, and thanks for spending your Tuesday evening with us. And good luck. We hope you all try chaos gardening.
Or vegetable gardening, if you want to
Any
do some
kind of
veggies
gardening,
too. You can do
pollinator
veggies
gardening.
too.
Get out there, get your hands dirty.
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll
Enjoy.
lose 50 pounds in a week if you do it.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's right. Exactly.
As long as you don't drink beer while doing it. That's the key
Yeah.
part. So, there you go. Thanks,
Bye,
y'all.
everybody.